Hi guys, in this video we will be talking about the kingdoms of Africa. We are going to explain the development of the slave trade, and we are also going to analyze how the African gold and salt trade facilitated the spread of ideas. By the time that you are finished, you will be able to summarize how trade helped shape African civilizations during the Middle Ages. So we'll talk about the early African kingdoms, starting with the Kush kingdom, which originated south of Egypt. And of course, near the Nile River, there's a lot of natural resources. So this kingdom became wealthy from selling ironwares, ivory, ebony, wood, and slaves to other nearby civilizations. Axum, which is located near the Horn of Africa in the east, is another powerful kingdom that arises during the Middle Ages, and they are known for adopting a form of Christianity in this area. So now we'll talk about the gold and salt trade. First, let's discuss what the geography of Africa does for the trade in the area. So the Sahara Desert, which is a huge desert in the northern part of the continent, separates sub-Saharan Africa from the Mediterranean. So for a long time, these two areas are isolated from one another because it's difficult to cross that desert. The domestication of the camel and the availability of oases throughout the desert is eventually going to allow for people to cross the desert and trade with one another. So West Africa is very rich in gold and other minerals and natural resources. And then you have the fact that they don't have salt, which is found in other parts of the continent, and it's essential for their survival because salt is used not only to season food but also to preserve it and keep it fresh for them to eat. So they're going to trade their gold and their other riches for salt because they need it in their civilization. Along these trade routes, we'll also see that not only goods are exchanged, they're also going to exchange ideas. Islam will eventually make its way to Africa through these trade routes. So that's one example of how ideas are also shared along trade routes. So the Kingdom of Ghana over in the east emerged around 750 and lasted until 1200. They conquered and taxed most of the people in the west, and they implemented heavy taxes on those trade routes, so that made them quite wealthy. The nobles from the area governed provinces in exchange for taxes, so similar to what was going on in Europe with feudalism. They used captives of war as slaves, and it sold them on markets as well. That is kind of the beginnings of the slave trade. When Muslims moved in and conquered some of this area, they continued the slave trade as well. The Kingdom of Mali emerged in 1240 and lasted until 1400. They conquered the old capital of Ghana, and their rulers converted to Islam. Mansa Musa was one of these famous rulers. He visited from Cairo, he visited Cairo and Mecca often, and when he did, he went over with caravans of gold and big parades and animals and lots of his slaves and servants, and he impressed the people of Cairo and Mecca with his vast wealth. He brought back with him Muslim scholars and architects to help contribute to the development of his civilization. And he built one of the most important cities in Africa, the city of Timbuktu. In this city, you would find universities that attracted students from all over Europe, Asia, and Africa, and it became a real cultural and educational hub in the continent. And then the Kingdom of Songhai emerged around 1464 and lasted until 1600. The Sultan of the kingdom, his name is Soni Ali, he captured Timbuktu, and he created the largest kingdom in East Africa with an elaborate system of taxation and communication that made it quite prosperous. Songhai did fall with the Moroccan rulers who used gunpowder to defeat them, and they were unable to govern from a great distance, these new rulers. So West Africa then is going to be split into many independent states because these new rulers were not able to govern effectively. Other African kingdoms that we should mention, the Kingdom of Benin. They are going to capture people from other tribes and sell them for guns and iron goods. So again, we begin to see the beginnings of the slave trade, which will eventually become a huge profit for West Africans when the Europeans and Americans begin to partake in this exchange. And then we have the Kingdom of Zimbabwe. They traded gold, copper, and ivory, so they also became quite wealthy from trade. And then we have the coastal cities of East Africa. These remained independent city-states, so they were not very large kingdoms, but they also participated in the gold trade. So there's a lot of people who benefit from trade in East Africa, and then there's others who are going to suffer greatly, as you can see from the capture of these people who were eventually sold into slavery. All right, and that brings us to our journal entry. So, considering the lecture and what you know about trade, what effects did trade have on African kingdoms during the Middle Ages? Make sure that you consider both the economic and cultural influences that come with trade, and give at least 3 examples to support your answer. If you have any questions, jot them down, and thank you for watching.